through your computer or whatever crappy Wi-Fi you're on, separate from any Wi-Fi security you may have, all the way to that WordPress. This is not a fixed thing. There is a nifty handshake that happens when you connect to the server. Ideally, your browser and the server will negotiate on the highest level of security. I'd say ideally because there are attacks that force it to not do that. But in order to have security, you need three things. You need a certificate, you need to have your server configured, and then you need WordPress. Because this is a WordPress meetup after all. So, step one, get a certificate. I will note here, if you are going to be playing with this stuff, and you have not been playing with this before, I highly, highly recommend get a spare domain to mess around with. Don't try doing this on a subdomain of your regular site. Just go out, if you have, cutekittenpictures.com, go out and get cutekittenpictures.org. The other nice thing is if you pick something that has exactly the same number of letters, you can do a dumb search and replace, say, the database. You won't break your PHP. But just get something that you can have at your playground. If you try to do this for real the first time, I mean, I've been doing this for years, and it still feels like black magic. I still go back to blog posts that I wrote as notes. So your hosting company may have a partnership with somebody like, say, GoDaddy or Komodo or RapidSSL. As long as the price is not extortionate, it is probably far easier to go with that. Unless you happen to have, say, moral reservations with dealing with GoDaddy, which is a different topic. There is a company called StartCom that runs StartSSL that will give you a free cert that you technically can't use for business purposes, but it's a good way to, if you have a personal site or that dummy site, good way to play around with. And then there is a very interesting project called Let's Encrypt that's a partnership between a number of the big vendors where they claim that they will give free certificates sort of automatically issued. They're supposed to be rolling that out at some point this year. It's not there yet, but that may change the game. Because if you start looking into the SSL marketplace, you may say, hey, wait a minute, this is a lot of false information. This seems like a racket. And you'd be right. They are essentially commodities, but if you go to these different vendors, they will try to talk you up into getting a $100,000 warranty, a little seal that you can put on your site, and all this garbage. It really is a racket. Fundamentally, they're all fungible. The vendors have come up with what they call classes. So technically, a class 1 cert is for an individual. That's what StartCom will give you. A class 2 means they send an email to your domain and you received it. And a class 3, I have that in green because that's what gives you that little green bar. Nothing up above there. Different browsers display it differently. In theory, they're verifying you more rigorously. Again, it's kind of hogwash. Unless you are doing financial stuff and it's really, really important, or you have a client that really, really insists on it, you probably don't need extended validation. And then the other factor to consider is, do you get a cert for one site? Where it's example.com. They have what are known as subject alternative name or UCC cert, where you can add in as many as you want. Some of the issuers will then charge you. They'll say you can go up to 10 for this many dollars, up to 50 for this much. That's convenient if you know ahead of time what all the sites are going to be. It does get a little annoying if you add new sites. The nice thing about that is you can have completely different sites. So you can have catpictures.com and dogpictures.com and horsepictures.net. They can all be listed in there. A wildcard cert, on the other hand, only goes to subdomains of one domain. Where that gets interesting in WordPress is if you run in network mode, aka multi-site. You can do that in either sub-directory or subdomain. So bob.example.com, sally.example.com, which in many ways is better because it lets people do more unique things. You buy one wildcard certificate that's good forever. Major labor saving. There are a ton of different settings to twiddle on this. I'm going to largely jump over a lot of that because for 95% of the time, you don't have control over these things. Any reasonable certificate issuer these days is going to give you a 2048-bit RSA cert signed SHA-256, and they'll let you bundle the intermediates. Don't worry what that means. At this point, we've gotten to the point where those are the defaults, and they are largely what you need. Assuming everything works, you get your browser has a bunch of these root certificates. Those are used to sign these intermediates, and then those sign the actual certificate that you get. So this is the one for WordPress.com. You'll see it is one of those wildcard certificates. So when you sign up for, I don't know how many hundreds of thousands of new WordPress blogs get created on WordPress.com every day, they don't have to go out and get a new cert. That also works for things like files.wordpress.com. And it's nice and modern. Everything is ship. So now you've got your cert. I keep using mouse. Now you got to get it on your server. I strongly recommend you consider making this somebody else's problem. I know that doesn't mean hiring. What I mean is, if you have shared hosting, like HostGator or DreamHost or something, this is your only option. You have to let them do it. If you are choosing between, say, managed hosting and unmanaged hosting on VPS, managed, they would likely handle this for you. And they do this day in and day out. No offense, they're probably better at it than you are. Because there are things you can screw up in a certificate where you may be out, some amount of money, and there's no undo button. If you do decide to start doing this yourself, you really need to know your users. The good thing is browsers and OSs have evolved recently. There are things we couldn't do even a year or two ago. Most notably, Windows XP is out of support. So nobody can stand up with a straight face and say, we need to support Windows XP. Because anybody who's using XP is an idiot at this point. And they have other problems. So as long as you don't care about supporting IE on Windows XP, Android 2, or Java 6, there are a lot of cool things you can do now. But remember what I said about those non-human users. The other thing about those non-human users, they don't hit your analytics. If you're using something like Google Analytics, when somebody fetches your RSS feed, you're not going to see that. You got to go and actually look at your raw server logs. I will gloss over, I will mention here that the Mozilla project has a really good wiki that they keep up to date with settings for Apache, Nginx, most common load balancers. If you are unlucky enough to be using Windows, you probably know how to deal with this. If for some reason you have to use Windows and this is new to you, there's a PowerShell script that will do a lot of this for you. And then there are very good testers that will let you assess whether you've done everything correctly. Again, this is why I said have that sandbox domain that you can play around with, because if you screw this up, there will be implications. Your clients may lose money, they will get angry. This is not something that you do once and forget about. That philosophy was okay 5 years ago, but now we're dealing with browsers getting better, attacks getting worse, but at the same time, evolving capabilities. And companies like Google saying, well, we're going to push people to do things more securely. So again, a reason to make this somebody else's problem. You're a Lewis Carroll fan. Okay, but we are, after all, at a WordPress meetup. So you've got your certificate, you've got your server all set up. Do you want to encrypt only your logins, only WP admin, or everything? If you are doing a new site, I would strongly recommend you seriously consider just encrypting everything from the beginning. Parts of the federal government are moving that way. It will make your life easier. I'm specifically mentioning admin Ajax here because if you have plugins or code that's doing stuff in Ajax, it may be assuming that admin Ajax is going to match the scheme or whatever the rest of your front end is. Well, not necessarily, because admin Ajax is under WP admin. There are lots of weird edge cases that break assumptions. Some are just browser issues, some are dumb assumptions that developers make, where they just say, oh, why would they ever be different? But they are. There are two constants that you can put in your WP config, creatively named force SSL login, force SSL admin. The second one implies the first one. So if you start with the first one and then you later go to the second one, the WP logins or force SSL logins are done. So say you do that, and then your enemy is going to be mixed content. You would have probably seen mixed content before. We'll try to see, but it's that little warning up there. IEC give you a pop-up. That's because there's insecure content inside a secure page. It can happen with anything. I can't tell you that browsers should treat it one way consistently because they won't. Sometimes they'll warn you, sometimes they'll drop it silently, sometimes they'll prompt you. Beware those embed this in your blog little things that you'll see. Prezi is really bad with that.
Excuse me, that's one of the questions I had, which is, what does that mean, the insecure content within a secure page that generates that warning?
So
maybe give a couple of examples.
You can have. So if you're on an insecure site, HTTP, you can put anything you want inside. You can also go up. So you could do a secure Twitter widget inside your insecure site. If you're secure, you can do a secure Twitter widget. If you're secure and you put an insecure Prezi, that will cause a warning. Nacin, your Firefox and Chrome developer tools will flag these. One way you can get around that protocol relative URLs. You just leave out the HTTP or the HTTPS. And you do want to make sure that whatever you're using will support both. But any sane browser will interpret them as whatever the same as the outer page is. I say sane browser because there are some dumb bots out there that will not do this. So if you're looking through your logs, you will see some 404s for pages that, you know, yoursite.com/wp-content/google.com. That's because they're dumb. It's a little vague in the documentation, but all the WordPress functions for enqueuing and registering do support protocol relative URLs. One thing to keep in mind is if for some reason you are looking at static HTML locally, they will get read as file URLs, which you probably don't have. I'm running a little slow here, but one trick is the isSSL function in WordPress is your friend. Do not try to roll your own detection function to see what scheme. Use isSSL, is smarter than you are. You can use that to turn an embed into a link. So I do this with maps for a certain site that doesn't have a cert. If you're on an insecure site, it will give you an iframe. If you're on a secure site, it falls back to just showing a link. And then your enemy, paying clients, users, they will happily go and say, but you know, I got this shared with this embed link on this other site, and it's cool. Why can't I use it? I love custom shortcodes for this, where if you have people doing, say, Twitter or some other site that they use heavily, write a shortcode and force their hand. The KSS function can be used to strip out stuff that you don't want. And then there are things like YouTube with OEmbed that you have to brute force it and just rip out the HTTP and put an S in. But the good news is Google, Facebook, Twitter, all your big players rigorously support SSL at this point. And you will likely not have any problems with them. There are a couple companies, Prezi, that are weirdly resistant to doing things right. You will have to have a debate with your users about the value of those, and it is a continuing education issue. But there are, you know, if you're willing to work with your users and get a sense of what are you really trying to accomplish, you can usually craft something that will let you do it securely. So I know that's a lot. Everything here is linked, so there's a whole lot of stuff you can read through. there's a lot of good wisdom out there in the community, and it's getting easier as time goes on. It's not so much hacky. There's fewer and fewer opportunities where you're having to do these brute force approaches. So we're not 100% there yet, but it's getting there. Any targeting questions on this before I turn it over?
I've got a question. So what about, I'm not sure, I think it's called Embedly, and then there's another provider now where given a URL, you'd be giving an Amazon URL, a YouTube URL, and what it would be doing is essentially wrapping it in their card, so to speak. Are you familiar with those, and are those secure?
They can be. So Gmail, for example, has started now proxying. When you do an image request in Gmail, they will proxy that through their servers. So it will stay secure because you keep using Gmail securely, but not. It's the kind of thing you definitely want to test. Keep your developer console open. Look for AJAX requests, especially ones that don't happen right away. I've seen sites where video sites where the outer part will load securely, the video will start playing securely, but then they fire off an asynchronous tracking request to some tracking service that they forgot to secure.
Or to add.
Exactly. Ad networks are bad with this too. So I am very much a believer in name and shame. If they've got a user voice site or you have a support contract with them, open ticket and say, guys, WTF, it's 2015. Get it right. All right, I'll turn it over to Eli here.
All right. While he gets fully situated, I guess I didn't really give Dylan a proper introduction. I apologize. I'm really glad he had a slide on it. We now have Eli White. Do you have a slide on this? Look at the one, but I'll say it.
Go ahead.
Eli White is the one of the owners of PHP Architect. It's a PHP magazine. They also do conferences including PHP Tech in Chicago in May. Correct?
Yes.
And then also PHP World, actually out in Tyson's in November. They did it for the first time in November. It was really great. I was there. I spoke. It was fun. I imagine you'll do it again in November in Tyson's.
Already have a contract.
Already have a contract. So there you go.
Week before Thanksgiving week.
All right. So he's like the CTO and like owner and managing director and chief taste tester and I don't know, conference chair. Anyway, he's got a slide on it anyway. They're all based actually in the DC area, which is pretty cool. And he's going to talk about some code security stuff, and then after that, we'll kind of pivot more towards like general user stuff as well. So this is like kind of cool technical dive in, and then we're going to come back out and talk about like what happened to my site, things like that. So.
Do they have 1 minute to come get some more food and some more beer and stuff like that? So like we have to eat all this. And so 30 seconds. So you have to come get seconds. If you want seconds, now's your chance.
If anyone knows any beer and food, please do so. And like one person stood up, so I guess that we're just going to keep going, but do actually eat all this at some point during the evening.
Thank you to the two people who have just followed me. More are allowed. Right, well, while folks are getting food, Nacin did say this is going to be a bit of a technical talk. Don't worry if you're not really technical yourself. This is going to be very high level. I will be showing you code, but mostly just to scare you. I will, however, be explaining how WordPress makes a lot of this so much easier on you as a user or you as a developer in WordPress itself. A quick little more of a background of why maybe or maybe not you want to listen to me for security. I've been an internet programmer since basically before people considered there to be an internet, or at least the web. And been doing it over 20 years and have worked for a number of fairly large startups, most of which have failed at this point. If Anybody know dig.com? The original, not the current one, that's a blasphemy. I was programmer number 2. And it was actually back when I was at Dig, and it suddenly became the number, it was in the top 10 of traffic of all websites at one point. It actually hit 3 at one point. When you have that many people coming and you have a TV celebrity at the head of your company, people like to try to hack your website a lot, especially his account. So I got really dumped into web security at the time and sort of made myself the web security expert for Dig, and then proceeded to, about every couple of years, bounce to another company, another startup as their web security expert and PHP expert, and have continued to do that. And now at this point, give web security talks at conferences, and we do online and in-person web security training. If you're interested, come see us. But let's move on from that at the moment. So I'm going to be talking specifically today about XSS and CSRF, otherwise known as CSRF, because CSRF is really hard to say. The first thing I want to mention, I was hoping Dylan didn't quite cover this, and he didn't, but quite often when I go and start giving a talk about security, one of the first things people say is, do I really need to worry about this? Especially if, I'm just running a little blog of my own on the side, or we're a small company, we don't have that much traffic. The answer is yes. Because it doesn't matter if you're big or if you're small, someone will try to hack you. If you go and throw up a brand new website and start watching the logs, within hours you will see attacks coming in. And it's because there are lots of high school kids out there with nothing better to do and lots of free time. And the idea of running a scanner that just starts hitting every single IP or random domain names, because they can start it running and see what happens. And there's plenty of scripts out there. I will not point you to them. You can Google for them if you would like to play with them. That have built in, for example, the top 100 hacks that old versions of WordPress might have worked, or the top 100 hacks for Drupal or Magento, etc. And there's scripts that will just run and start hitting every IP address or every random domain name starting from A.com, B.com, C.com, and try every single one of these attacks in the hopes that they randomly find a site it works on. So you do have to worry about these things. Now, we're going to be talking specifically about cross-site scripting, XSS, or cross-site request forgery, CSRF here. Right? There are lots of other types of attacks. There are lots of horrible, evil, mean types of attacks that would scare you even more. However, first of all, WordPress takes care of a lot of this for you. A lot of the, session hijacking and session fixation and clickjacking and all sorts of these scary terms. WordPress, for the most part, does a lot of that for you, and you don't have to worry about that as much. There's still some, if you're going to get into doing a lot of coding, you should familiarize yourself with these and make sure that you don't cause a security hole. But the number 1 and number 2 security holes out there are these two, and combined, they're even worse. So let's talk about these a little bit. So cross-site scripting. Simply put, it's the idea that a user is sending data to you that you are, accidentally interpreting as a script and allowing to execute in the user's browser. All right? So the user's giving you something and you're executing. This is similar in a sense to SQL injection, if you're familiar with that, where the user's giving you data and you're accidentally having it interpreted as SQL and running that code in your database. In this case, you're allowing the user to run code in the browser on your website or to run code in other people's browsers on your website. There are lots of different ways this attack can come in. You basically have to trust no one. Never trust your user. It doesn't matter if your user is you. You don't trust any data that comes from the user, because there's so many ways that bad-minded people can force things to happen in your browser. So forms that come in, if you're looking at a user agent, if you're looking at HTTP headers, you can't trust them because they could all be potentially hacked. They could all have attacks in them. To fix this in general, you're going to escape it to the situation, and we're going to talk about that. The main one thing I want you to take away from this whole talk, if there's nothing else you do, are the letters FIEO. Filter, input, escape, output. The most important part of this is actually the escape output. As long as you only EO, you'll still be protected. But the idea is that when data comes to you, you should filter it to be the data you were expecting. If you ask the user, what year were you born? Make sure that what they entered is a year and not cat. Besides the fact that, well, cat's not really an attack, but that's also not useful to you, right? You asked them a year. You expected a year. You should give an error back to the user and go, cat is not a valid year. Please give me a year. Or at the very least, you should ignore that and go, okay, I'm assuming that's year 0. And maybe that doesn't work so much for years, but if you ask them, how many cats do you have? And they enter, instead of 12, they type the word 12. Well, you assume 0 and move on, perhaps. But then, anytime you have data that you have taken from the user in some way, and you're now going to echo that back to the user, you're going to want to escape that. All right. Now, there's actually 3 types of cross-site scripting that get scarier as they go. I'll start you off low. So the first type is reflected XSS. All right. Reflected XSS is where you're taking content the user gave you and directly echoing it back to them. So I have a number of, like, the simplest PHP example, you could make versions of this. So in this case, the security hole is just saying, thank you for your submission, post first name. And all someone now has to do, if you had this form where you were getting the first name coming in, is to put some script in there. All right. Now I'm actually going to flip out real quick and show you what this looks like. Ooh, that's really small. Let's fix that. That's better. All right. So here's a common example where you have a search form, and I'm going to search for cats. And nope, no results found for cats, because there's not really anything behind this page. However, if I go in here and type, oh, come on, you're not going to autofill for me? You're going to make me type. So one thing you will commonly see when people are demoing this is what I've just done, is where people will type script alert XSS. That's just one of the simplest ways for you to tell if you're testing your own site if there's an XSS hole there. Because now if I submit this, if I make sure I have the bug, oh, sorry, I'm in Safari. I should note, this varies per browser. I have to switch between browsers to show you some of these security holes, because Firefox and Safari and other browsers now are trying to help solve some of these at various points in time. And it makes it harder on a security creature here to now show you, no, look at this evil thing that happened. There's autofills here. Here we go. So I'm going to do this, and hey, there we go. Firefox did not protect us against the XSS. So I submitted what was supposed to be my first name, and what got submitted actually came through as script, and it got interpreted as script, and this alert actually happened. The alert kind of doesn't work in Safari because Safari has decided that alerts are evil in general, and we should just never let them happen. And if someone was being a little trickier, they could have put, Bob and alert XSS, so that it still ends up saying, no results found for Bob up here, but the script ran. Now, the usual question that someone raises their hand and asks about this point is, why the heck do you care? Right? The user is only hacking themselves in this situation, right? The user's coming to the website, they're entering it into this form, and they're submitting it through, and they're kind of hacking themselves. And in all honesty, it's kind of not that bad, because they are just hacking themselves. Except for a couple things. So first of all, realize that while I'm just alerting XSS, you can do much more evil things here. Like, what if I, in this case, alerted document.cookie? Oh, look, there's my session variable in very small font. Sorry about that. But there's my session cookie that's running on this website. And if that script was able to just access that to alert it, that also means it could have accessed that to send it to another third-party website of evilhacker.org. And now, if that code gets run, it's going to steal that person's session cookie and send it off to somewhere else. And any cookies that exist. Maybe there's some type of user cookie and preference things, and who knows what else is in there. But the thing is, this gets even worse. Because first of all, in this case, while someone has to come here and post this in, this particular page, because it's a search page, most search pages allow you, let me get back over here, to actually send your request as either GET or POST, which means, oh, come on, Safari, that this attack can actually be done in the URL instead. So now, if I make a URL like this, let's see if Firefox stops me. Nope. That URL causes the attack, which means I can now make a link on my website to this URL and say, hey, everyone, go click this. People will click it. And they have now been forced to hack themselves, essentially. The worst part, and you see this on Facebook all the time, and in another presentation, I have a great screenshot. I forgot to pull it into this one, is that people are stupid, sorry to say. And I'm sure you've all seen, because it happens on Facebook all the time, be like, hey, everyone, go to this website and paste this thing in, and this really cool thing happens. And everyone goes and does it. Because they want to see the really cool thing that happens. The best one, that was a screenshot I had, was someone on Facebook who had actually posted it like, hey, there's this cool new feature on Facebook. If you enter your Facebook password, it comes out as all asterisks. Look, and they typed a whole bunch of asterisks. And the first two friends who saw that, who were in on it, typed a comment, which was a whole bunch of asterisks. And they went, wow, it does work. And then the third friend typed, I secretly love 50 Cent, followed by a curse word I won't say, mixed company, when that comment went through. Not a good password to have, anyway. So the fact is, people can be tricked into doing this, so you can be tricked into hacking themselves. So you need to stop this from happening. You need to stop your code from being interpreted as script. All right? So there's these really scary, ugly-looking ways to do this. This is a WordPress meetup. Don't worry about this. WordPress gives you very pretty ways to do this, and that's what I'm going to talk about real quick. Because in raw PHP, there's ways to handle it, but because PHP has to handle millions of different websites and different configurations, it can't make some assumptions for you that WordPress can. So as I said, you need to actually escape the output to the purpose it's being used for. Typically in WordPress, this means you're going to be escaping it out in some form of HTML, but you actually have to escape it the proper way. So WordPress provides a number of functions. There's actually a few more that aren't listed here. So these are the basic ones you're going to be using every single day if you're coding in WordPress. So if you have some text you're going to output as raw HTML, you have escape HTML and you just pass the text in and it comes out escaped and saved for you. You have escape text area. If this is some text you're trying to echo back into a text area to be edited again, for example. Escape adder for attribute. This is allowing you to put something into an HTML tag, okay, into the tag attribute. You've also got, which Dylan had in his slide one place, escape URL that actually prepares a URL to be saved to output. Like I said, those are the four main ones you're going to be using when creating HTML on the fly. If you're trying to create JavaScript on the fly from inside of your PHP, inside of WordPress, hats off to you. There is a function, escape.js, that takes care of that for you because JavaScript has to be escaped in a completely different way because JavaScript is weird and likes doing things like allowing 27 versions of quote to be considered a quote. Thank you, JavaScript. And just in case you're ever writing your own code to like produce an RSS feed raw for some strange reason, or any other XML, you have to do XML differently because XML and HTML are not the same thing. And you still have to do this really, really ugly thing, which I can kind of half explain, but the fact is it works. You can cut and paste that, and it works. And by the way, I will post these slides online afterwards. So if you ever need an XML solution, you can find it. Hopefully you won't. So that was reflected XSS. So let's go on to the next one, which now gets a little bit scarier, which is stored XSS. In this case, you're storing the data that the user gave you, and now you're going to later display it to them. Okay? This is worse solely for the reason that now people can essentially leave attacks on your website for other people to run into. You don't need to trick someone into doing it. You don't need to trick them into clicking the URL. You don't need to trick them into pasting something into a form. You only have to leave this waiting and have them run into it. So the security, an example security hole here is I'm doing a WordPress database insert into this. Let's say you happen to have a conference CFP software. Not that I've written one in WordPress. If you ever need one, let me know. And so you're doing some raw database access here, and we're going to, change someone's first name in their call for paper, right? So we're updating conference CFP, set first name where ID equals. And we're even doing this right to protect against SQL injection. We're using prepared statements. So we don't have to worry about that attack. However, there's a direct security hole there again. Specifically the fact we have again taken raw post data from the user and are putting that straight into the database, right? And more importantly, that should have been filtered, but most importantly, the real security holes down here at the bottom, where we then retrieve that data out of the database and then just echo it back. So we stored the attack that they gave us into the database, and now every time you happen to go and visit this person's profile page, the attack is echoed back to anyone. So I similarly have an example. I think I need to use Firefox for this one. We'll find out. All right. So for this one, we actually need 2 pages. So here is this person's profile page, right? Welcome to Oscar's profile page. And I can go over here and just to show this, it's really hooked up to a database. And so that I can test if my local database is running. I'm going to change this to Eli. Your real name has been updated. I come and load this page. It's now Eli's profile page. But because I'm not escaping that, I can now come in here, put in the ubiquitous script attack. Let's make that a little bigger again. There we go. Submit it. Right? Nothing happened here because it wasn't ever being echoed out here. But now when I come back over here and just load this page, the attack happens. Every time I load this page, the attack happens. Now granted, it looks kind of messed up, but a smart attacker, if I was Oscar M here and I wanted to leave a real smart attack, I would do something like this, where I'm entering my actual name as Oscar, followed by a script, saving that as my username, and now when someone loads this page, the page looks right, and if there wasn't an alert breaking the page halfway through, that JavaScript code is executing. And if that code was, again, take document.cookies, send it off to a third-party website via an AJAX request, it would happen. So as you can see, this is bad, because now Oscar can come and create an attack on his profile page, and everyone that just happens to browse to his profile page gets hit by the attack without them even realizing it, and it shared all of their cookies or whatever information off to the other side. What's worse is that once the person can execute arbitrary script, like it's not just I'm going to steal cookies, right? But let's say that that person, once you're executing arbitrary script, you have access to the full DOM of the page. So let's say that that person was logged into that site. That script could actually go and pick things off the page, like if part of the page changed to say like, thanks for logging in, or like had your username at the top. It could read that out of the HTML and send that on. It could actually make the browser click some links by changing the window location. It could open a hidden page behind this page and send it off to your actual profile page and inject another attack there potentially, and then read all of your data, and all of your bank information is gone and sent off somewhere. I mentioned I would try to scare you. So, luckily, the solution to this is exactly the same thing. You escape the output, okay? The same way you escape the output for a reflected attack is the same way you escape it for a stored attack. Learn these functions, use them all the time. Okay? So now we're going to get into the tricky one. And the scary one to most PHP folks, because it doesn't involve any PHP whatsoever. This is DOM XSS. What happens in JavaScript stays in JavaScript. All right? So this is where you're taking data from the user, and you're never hitting your server. You're instantly reflecting it right back to them. It's kind of like the reflected, but you're actually live changing the DOM of the page to show something to them. This is often the case in a lot of modern Ajax websites where they run through and do that. And you're like, you want to, like if you go to Flickr and you want to change the name of a photo, you click on the name of it and it just turns into a form field magically, and you type enter and you hit return and it changes back to text. That's all happening in the DOM. It's never going to the browser. So, quick example. Really, it's just the same thing. So this is a case where this is never hitting the server. I'm typing my name in here, and it's saying, thanks for the submission, Eli. And as you can see, I already have the attack saved in here. And the attack happens. Again, this is a case where the user has to be tricked into it, because this is happening live on the page. But again, we have established people can be tricked into anything. The solution to this gets very messy. And this is why I hope you never really have to deal with this. One of the simplest solutions is just don't ever do this. There is completely the option that if someone is going to be entering some data, instead of just live updating the data on the page, go ahead and round trip it to the server and back. So send it to the server, let the server filter it, escape it, return it back to you, and use the response from the server as what you then display back to the user, even if you're doing it live. This is a quick JavaScript function that kind of replicates what like escape HTML would do, but the problem is that it only works for HTML, it doesn't work with attributes, it doesn't work with CSS classes, and JavaScript gets really particular about how you have to escape certain different things. So I highly recommend instead, if you do have to deal with this, if you are writing custom JavaScript libraries, there's this great jQuery encoder. It's on GitHub, Chris is Beef. Yeah, whatever. jQuery encoder. And it gives you these functions that are very similar to the WordPress ones, but now inside of JavaScript, to allow you to encode for something for CSS, to encode it for HTML, to encode it for an attribute, to encode it for JavaScript if you're writing JavaScript on the fly inside of your JavaScript. You're crazy, but go ahead. And to encode URLs. So again, check out that if you ever have to deal with that third type. So the one last attack I want to talk about is the CSRF, the cross-site request forgery. So in the case of XSS, it's someone coming in and data is being submitted to you, and you're interpreting that, unfortunately, as script. In this case, it's something very different. It's the user having the ability to forge or force a request on behalf of another user. So me having a way that you come to my website, and I have somehow made your browser talk to a different website without you realizing it. All right? There are very simple ways to do this via image tags, and there are complicated ways to do it via JavaScript. So the simplest way to do this, if I had an evil website, is I could put an image tag on my website with width 1, height 1, so you never notice it, and source equals, and it's any URL I want. Now, when you come and visit my website, it's going to make a request off to there thinking it's getting an image. And you have now forced a request on behalf of that user. You've made them contact bank.com/login/whatever because the browser thought it was just an image request. Right? That works for GET type things, if you can put it in the query string. If you need to force them to actually do a post, to fill out a form, you actually need to use JavaScript to do it. This is a very simple way to do it in jQuery that actually, luckily, most browsers block, but there's other ways around it. So, quick example to show you the scary nature of this. while Nacin waves at me in the back. All right. So, get back to that. So here is this victim page, all right? And there's nothing on there because if I go over here and go to the victim page, this is like the end page of, oh, that's really tiny. This is like the end of an AJAX request where when a post comes in to, this is changing someone's password, right? It's just doing a, hey, if a post came in with new password and a user, we're going to change that user's password, right? So pretty straightforward. And let's say on my evil website, I made this really big button, said win free kittens. You probably click on that, right? You get a chance to win some free kittens, right? And you click on it. Oops, wait, what just happened? All right. What's worse is this is showing it to you in Firefox, or Firefox, where this is happening, forces it into another tab. This is a case where you need to use Safari to really get screwed over. Because in Safari, oh, nothing happened. Let me try it again. What's going on? Where's my free kittens? What's actually happening here is that, again, this is a post form that's actually sending it off to, again, pretend this is another website. It's sending off a change the password to you are hacked when you click this button and submit it through, right? I can actually show you this happening because this is working because it's putting it inside of an iframe. So there's a hidden iframe on this page that you don't see where this is actually happening. So if I go and reload this page, but I've now made the iframe visible, you can see that when I click this button, inside of that iframe, it's loading that other page, submitting the post, and just changed your password. So every time you come here and click, you're constantly changing your password back to you are hacked. All right. Obviously, this is bad. All right. The nice part is that WordPress actually makes this really easy to fix. Other website, if you're using raw PHP, the solutions text screens I have for this are like 3 entire screen slides full of code. WordPress, it's 4 functions. You really only need to use 2 at any point. So the simplest version here is on the form. So you're going to have a post on your website to submit something. You need to make a hidden input type, give it whatever name you want, and you create the value of it with WP create nonce, and you give it, the action name is you just give it some name that you're going to remember and use later when you're verifying, okay? It could be kittens in this case. All right, and then on submission, before you do anything with the data that came to you, you call WP verify nonce, you give it the raw token that was sent back from the user, and you give it the action that you're checking against. And that will return a true or false. Did this user actually perform this action, or was it a forged request on their behalf? I won't go into, because it would be a 10-minute discussion, how it's doing that, but there's all sorts of fun stuff behind the scenes that it's doing to truly detect that the user did it, not someone else did it on their behalf. I mentioned there were actually 4 functions. There's 2 others you can use to help yourself out here. There is actually WP nonce field that actually just creates that entire field for you if you don't want to go ahead and make, on the previous one where I had, oops, back I said, back. The input type equals hidden, name equals token, value equals whatever. You could just do a single call to WP nonce field. You give it the name of the field and again the action, it generates that for you. So you don't even need hardly any code there. And if you are doing AJAX within WordPress and you're making your own custom AJAX endpoints, there's a special function to help you out with that. It's called check AJAX refer. Again, you give it the action, you give it the query argument, and there's a third optional parameter called die. By default, it's true. And what that means is if this function fails, if check AJAX refer says, oops, this was a forged request, it literally calls die in PHP for you. It just kills that request dead, doesn't let anything else process from that point on. Because the assumption is in Ajax context, if something is wrong with the request, you don't need to worry about generating a whole page of response and here's what happened or not. You just need the Ajax request to die, and your front end will take care of realizing that something happened. You can change that to false if you want to carry on and do extra things, but it's very easy to just check Ajax refer and realize that the rest of your code won't run if it failed. So, thank you very much. I will put the presentations up on my website there, eliw.com. And again, are there any very specific targeted questions to this before we move on and then have the panel later? Yes?
I'm glad you warned us this is high level, so I'm lower level. If I use gravity forms, do I have to know any of that or use any of that, or does gravity forms, put all that in there?
No, you're good. You'll be fine.
Yeah.
I don't need to know any of that.
Yeah.
So the answer is gravity forms takes care of it for you. I assumed that was the answer, but I didn't know.
Yeah, if you keep it up to date.
Cool.
All right, thank you very much. Eli. So I really love web application security, and those, even if you don't code, a lot of those attacks probably sound really interesting. In my opinion, those are the two most boring attacks. There are 10 major different classes of vulnerabilities that people normally describe, at least the 10 most popular ones. Beyond that, though, there's like dozens of other really cool things that I have kind of like always enjoyed. If you're interested, Google something like clickjacking or SSRF instead of CSRF. That said, one of the reasons why I'm interested in web application security, or rather, because I'm interested, I help coordinate the WordPress security. So I'm going to talk a little bit about quickly like how that works and why, for the most part, you should be fine, even if you didn't understand all of that. So quick little random thing. If you do decide to go to your WordPress site and type script alert, whatever, close script, and hit save, chances are it will run. Do not panic. If you are an administrator or an editor on your site, then you have the ability to do whatever you want in that content. The reason is because, of course, there are other things that are potentially insecure that you might need to do. A great example is maybe you are embedding a video from YouTube or really anywhere else, or you're embedding a poll or a Google form or something like this. These all require iframes or embed or object tags. You don't really need to worry about that, except for the fact that WordPress isn't like stripping it out and saying, no, you cannot embed this video. That is just a basic thing in case one of you tried testing this, maybe like the two of you that might try testing this. We get like 3 or 4 reports a week from random security researchers that are like, oh my God, I hacked WordPress. And they like send us this thing and it's like script alert, I hacked you. Like, no, you really didn't. So random little thing there. The way the core security team works is that if someone wishes to email security at pretty much any domain for any project out there, security at Drupal.org, security at WordPress.org, they're going to this team. This team, in WordPress's case, consists of about 30 experts in the field, whether it's lead developers of WordPress, security researchers, some outside security researchers that we work with on occasion, and they take a look at this, and ideally this is responsibly disclosed. There's 2 different main pathways to a bug being disclosed. Normally it's full disclosure, someone just posted up on the internet, sent it out to a bunch of people. Responsible disclosure is that they first disclose it to the vendor, in this case it would be WordPress. We are then able to look at it, we're able to evaluate it, we respond to this reporter. We then work with that reporter, security researcher, over a period of anywhere from a few days to potentially a few weeks or even longer, depending on how complex this issue is. We work with them on a fix. We might involve other outside researchers. I have had like a number of meetings in very like clandestine locations in like parking garages. I'm kind of kidding. Talking about like different aspects of security and like how are we going to coordinate this with other projects. So as one example, if you happen to also in your spare time run a Drupal site, or more likely in work time run a Drupal site, the Drupal security release 2014 security advisor number 4 was actually credited as fixed by Andrew Nacin of the WordPress security team, because it was a thing that affected both WordPress and Drupal, so we fixed it for them. kind of cool. So if anyone at any point ever says like, oh, but one of them is insecure, well, they both kind of are on occasion because this thing happens. But also, we were able to work together to solve this because some things affect more than just one application. So once we're then releasing a fix, in the sense that like I am literally pushing a button, or one of the other main developers is pushing a button, this then starts a process where normally your site knows that like a new version of WordPress is available. So WordPress 4.2 will be out in April. Really cool release. There's a few cool stuff in it, including emoji support. That's not the coolest thing, but it's, I don't know, some people really like emoji. So, but with that also comes with 4.2, it'll be released. It's a big major release. We also do these minor releases where like 4.1.1, that extra little 0.1, or 4.2.1.2.3. We did not have a 4.04 release as much as we tried to like get to that point. A little random web joke, sorry. But the way this ends up working is that if we deal with a minor security release, we, as of about a year and a half ago, almost 2 years ago, that update is automatically pushed out to WordPress sites. So your site, in order to know that there's a new release of WordPress, it asks WordPress.org, hey, like, what's the latest release? And WordPress.org says, oh, here's some information for you. So you used to like update automatically, you push the button and it would just work. Nice, cool. We said, no, that's too complicated. So instead, update manually is actually pushing the button, and update automatically is just it happens without you even paying attention to it. Automagically is actually what it is often called in the product world. So in this case, what ends up happening is the WordPress API actually tells the site, hey, you might want to check a little bit more often, just maybe this week for some reason. So there might be some enterprising person watching the responses to see when we actually start to lower the time difference. And eventually all installs are checking like every hour rather than every day. At which point we can then flip a switch, send out a WordPress release, and every WordPress site on the planet automatically updates the latest version. That's kind of cool. I think our bandwidth on the last one was we did about 10 million sites in the span of about 45 minutes. Because it happened so quickly before many people have a chance to respond, I actually have a great story of a WordPress community guy who was on the golf course and like started getting tons of emails from all the sites that he runs, letting him know that his site is updated. He's like, sweet. And like, now watch this run. Right? So, politics jokes, site politics jokes. We're in DC. So what ends up happening is that like 98.5% of all updates are automatic now. Like the chance of someone actually beating us at pushing the button is pretty slim. Now there are some sites, of course, that do not support automatic updates. There's a great plugin that you can install called Background Update Tester, and for some reason it tells you that it will not automatically install a security update for you. But most sites do this automatically. If we do not do this, it's entirely possible that your host might. If you're hosted on any number of servers, such as Pagely, WP Engine, let's see here, DreamHost, Bluehost, GoDaddy, all those big ones, they all just, like any site that they have, they just immediately update as fast as possible. So we let them know in advance. We let them know, hey, like a few days out, just to warn you, you may want to clear off your Wednesday morning because there's a security release about to drop. And so they're able to then react in the sense that they're able to like start the engines and push things out to potentially hundreds of thousands or millions of sites that they host alone. So our response is very proactive in dealing with these things, which means that an issue that might have affected WordPress core, which is actually highly unlikely to have affected you to begin with, because we're kind of good at building software, and therefore we don't normally have like giant gaping holes in security. We're normally dealing with like really random stuff. Like as Eli was saying, you can attack yourself, but it's not really necessarily going to affect anyone else for like that particular kind of bug. So that's how core security works. Now when we start getting to plugins, and someone mentioned Gravity Forms earlier, and there's a lot of other plugins out there, there's 30,000 of them on the directory. Those are not necessarily like security audited or vetted by anyone in particular, beyond like the plugin developer who who authored that plugin. So the way this works, this goes through a whole separate process in the sense that what'll end up happening is that a plugin author will potentially contact the plugin security team, and they'll say, I found an issue with my plugin and I need help. Or a researcher will contact us and say, I need to get in touch with this plugin author. Can you help me coordinate an issue with them? And so what ends up happening is that we go through this very similar process where we coordinate normally with more people this time to try and figure out, okay, we have this particular issue in this particular plugin. We evaluate, well, first off, we were told about this ahead of time, which is great. We take a look at its severity. How many sites does this affect? We know a general idea of how many actual installs the site is running on. Is it 1 million? Is it 5 million? Is it 100,000? Is it 5? My plugin, I have one plugin that has like 10 installs. Okay, probably shouldn't even support it anymore because no one's using it. But the point is, like, if it's only 10 installs, well, this is not nearly a big deal. But if it's a plugin like WordPress SEO, that chances are you probably run, that runs on a few million websites, and it had a pretty critical security vulnerability a few weeks ago. So what ended up happening is that we were able to work with the researcher who reported this issue, we were able to work with the plugin author, and then the plugin security team was able to evaluate this fix. And the core security team, which acts as kind of like a parent, looked at it and like validated it, and they're like, yep, no, that looks good. It looks simple. It doesn't look like it's going to break anything. We have tested it, definitely fixes the bug. And then we not only release it, but then we flip the toggle and say, auto update this on every single site that it is on. So by default, the plugin is not auto updated. You have to go in and actually click like update 30 times or click the checkboxes and do it that way. This is designed to, if we're dealing with these critical security vulnerabilities that happen in all software has bugs, you just don't always hear about it. There was a great bug, by the way, in Red Hat Linux yesterday. This was like in a non-released version of software, but there's this web application called Squid. And when the service restarted, it just deleted every file on the machine. And so the bug report was actually like, this is the problem. Expected, Squid is restarted. Actual, my machine is ruined. Right? Like, that's basically what happened. So all software has bugs. These things happen. Normally not so bad, but nonetheless, this was a pretty good one that had like, the entire web application security community laughing for the last like day. And one guy like feeling really bad about writing a pretty nasty bug. So, so with that, we're able to now push out like plugin updates. We're able to push out theme updates. Themes go through a separate review process. You get them from WordPress.org. But essentially, we have these processes that are actually baked in, which is really great. So if you're interested in more things about code security, like what Eli was talking about, you should check out his slides. You can also check out developer.wordpress.org. It's a really great resource and reference guide for not only how these functions work, but also detailed guides on how to deal with like writing secure code. If you are interested more in how auto updates work, you should go to make.wordpress.org/plugins. Make.wordpress.org. It's our main home for making WordPress. And you can take a look at a post that was recently thrown up there that has like a full FAQ on how all of this works, even though I just basically dumped it on all of you. Other than that, if you're just a user who just like wants to make sure that your site is okay and things like that, other than possibly considering getting an SSL certificate, as Daryl was saying, as Dylan was saying. Also, like, just generally keep everything up to date always. If WordPress isn't already doing it for you, and then you're probably going to be okay. That said, I'm happy to take any questions, and as well as if Dylan and Eli want to kind of like make their way up, we're happy to take any questions on security. Obviously, like there was a lot of code and other kinds of security tonight. I just kind of gave like the general dump on users. If we can't answer questions, we'll find someone who can. And we'll start with, don't all jump at once. Yes?
I've been seeing a bunch of websites for clients keeping them updated, and I always back them up beforehand.
Sure.
Knock on wood, I've never had anything break when I update. Is that less of an issue now because you're
That is, yes. So like the reason why we're so confident in being able to do auto updates is that we're confident that we're not going to break anything. The process does not do a backup. That should scare you, except for the fact that we have like a 99.997% success rating. That comes out to.
So you're saying you failed 0.03%?
Yes. 0.003% of the time, which comes out to like 50 sites every 10, 15 million. And none of those sites actually break. They just don't update. Like they tried updating, then they just roll back. Right. So we have a lot of things in here. Ultimately, when you're updating the code, especially for WordPress itself, you're never going to have an issue with like the database having a problem.
What about the plugins though?
Plugins, it really depends on the plugin. It is of course a good thing to back up generally. If you're on a host like really any of the web hosts that are out there allow you to like set regular backups, which means that you're only going to have the stuff from the night before or the hour before anyway. While I would generally say it is a good practice to back up your site, I have on more than one occasion at this meetup, not today, but in the last 5 years, pulled up someone's site on their iPad and just like when they weren't looking, push the button, like update. And I'm like, don't worry, it's fine. And if it's not, my computer is right here and I'll fix it for you. Like white glove service, I will take care of that. But like otherwise, that is like staking, and a lot of this like doing automatic updates for us is very much like we're putting our name on it to the point where if you are one of those 0.003% of sites, so like less than 500 people have ever received one of these emails. The email specifically says, if you have a problem, like first off, we're sorry because something might have gone wrong, we don't know what. If you have a problem, you can email us at a secret email address, and we will help you get your site back. Like we will fix your site and we'll prevent this from ever happening again for you or anyone else. We get like 3 emails back, like anytime. And every single time they're like, I don't know what you're talking about, my site is fine. So this is actually a problem because we were hoping to get this 99.997% down to, or up to 100%, because we were trying to find like these other irregular sites. But it seems that all of these sites just work anyway, so it's fine. But like it actually, like this email is signed by the WordPress team. And a lot of people flipped out about that. And I was very adamant about making sure that our name shows up on that email because it is our responsibility for that site to update properly.
But I will make a mention of how we not benefit from all this auto updating goodness, and that is to go around hacking on other people's code. Where if somebody says, hey, can you just change that color there? Like, oh, yeah, sure. Example I can think of is, the WordPress logo on the login page? The wrong way to customize that is to go into core and start messing around with it. The right way to fix that is, there's a filter for that. There's a plugin that does it. Yeah, there's also a plugin, but like login logo. Yes, by one of the lead developers. Yes. Yeah, there it is. So it's, there's a lot of different things for this. Yeah, but resist the temptation to go in and start overwriting things, especially with plugins where they're not getting the same benefit.
If you're playing around with themes and you're just like making changes to your template and CSS and things like that, you're pretty much going to be fine. Unless you start dealing with, like, once you start to realize that you're maybe getting out of your comfort zone with doing like really crazy things and you start to use different variables, post and get and all this other stuff, then you want to start thinking about, okay, I'm no longer a tinkerer, I'm a programmer now. I need to think like one, and I need to start looking at like a lot of the developer documentation, especially what Eli was doing.
Make a child. Yeah, and I will add that if there's something you want to build in a plugin that's not there, plugin developers are human. If you contact them and say, hey, I would like to safely, responsibly tweak the behavior of your plugin, can you add a hook or a filter here? I've had success in the past reaching out to plugin authors. Usually if you're, especially if you maybe take a shot at writing the code to do that, send them a patch, they may be very receptive to that.
Other questions? Yeah.
Playing around with AngularJS.
Yes.
Where you can type in something and it almost echoes it back to you.
Yes.
And I'm wondering if these security concerns pertain. I don't know enough about it yet, whether it pertains.
Yes.
Yes. Yes. I mean, I was wondering because you're...
And specifically, the part that's really going to pertain was the part I was getting into. I hope you don't have to deal with this.
Yes.
You're now getting into DOM manipulation where the JavaScript is creating the output itself. Luckily, Angular, for example, includes with it, sort of like how WordPress has all those escape HTML, escape attributes, etc. things. Angular has its own set of safe escaping and filtering functions built in.
Developed by a Google guy, so I figured it had some of those.
Yeah, but like with any of these, it's something you're going to have to protect yourself from, because unfortunately with many of these bugs, the reason why the security holes constantly still exist is because there's no magical way for the software to just, oh, we're going to fix that for you. Like some things can, like both Nacin and I have mentioned clickjacking, which is this really amazing blow your mind thing when you see it. Luckily now in any modern browser, it's basically just fixed for you because there's a header that I hope WordPress is setting automatically now. Yeah, the WordPress is setting automatically for you that tells the browsers don't allow clickjacking to happen. And it's just gone and it's not a problem as long as people aren't using old browsers. Most of these bugs though aren't things that can just be fixed with a header of, hey, don't allow cross-site scripting to happen. Well, problem is a lot of things that look like cross-site scripting are also what you would validly do. And the code can't just know to stop this but not stop that. So you as a programmer have to do it.
So talking about that a little more, you mentioned Angular. The same thing would apply for Ember, for Backbone, for React, for any of these different libraries. All of their like templating. So in Backbone's case, which WordPress uses Backbone pretty substantially for a lot of its new stuff, especially media and the customizer, things like that. It uses underscore.js under the hood by the same person, Jeremy Ashenkost. And its templating language is like has very specific. It's 3 different things. If you played with this ever before, one runs code, one outputs a value, and then the other one outputs a value in like escape, which is essentially the same thing as like running escape HTML the way WordPress has this function. Angular, they all have this very similar thing. You just have to be very mindful of it because obviously you do not usually you like don't want to do this. So in our case, in WordPress's case, we use a slightly different variant of the markup, and we're able to specifically identify whenever we use like 3 braces in a row, which is basically unfiltered, unescaped, everything. We have code that specifically checks for those and like, why are we using it here? Because we shouldn't be. And every time we've ever tried using it in like any other random place, chances are someone accidentally coded a vulnerability. So you definitely have to be paying attention to this a lot. But if you look up more about DOM XSS, and you can just Google like Angular DOM XSS, there will be like articles explaining exactly how to do it.
I'll just add, so Nacin mentioned that they have tools to flag things. I highly recommend getting yourself set up with the PHP Code Sniffer. So the PHP Code Sniffer is a general project for sniffing.
This is for developers. Yeah, for developers.
So PHP Code Sniffer looks at PHP in general. Then there is a set of rules called WordPress Code Sniffer that has, there are rules that are tweaked sort of for general, for core, and then for VIP hosting. But it will look at, and again, it's not an omnipotent genius, but it will look at certain things and say, hey, wait a minute, you are looking at raw variables here coming in.
And there are WordPress specific rules as well that can look for particular security issues with your code. That's pretty cool. You just Google like WordPress Code Sniffer. I mean, everything you can find like with a pretty easy search. Yes.
Hello, my name is Claire, and I'm a tinkerer.
That's totally good. I started as a tinkerer.
Can you comment on products like SiteLock and WordPress?
Yes, I should probably, yeah, I'll take this one. Yeah, so there are tons of plugins that are out there that are like, I am a security plugin. There's iTheme Security, there's WordFence, there's a bunch of other ones. For the most part, none of these are harmful. In many cases, they are beneficial. However, a lot of this has to do with what is normally called as like defense in depth, to the point where they're like specifically turning off features that, well, let me take a slight step back. Pretty much all security also has to be weighed with usability. The most secure site is one that like does not exist. And that is not very usable because you want a website. So you always have to be balancing these 2 different, very competing ideals in many cases. Very rarely does something that, making something more usable makes it like more secure at the same time. It's pretty much always a seesaw. So in this particular case, a lot of these times they're actually going to shut down, like, let's say, the ability for like, WordPress mobile apps to communicate with your site. If you're not using that feature, sure, turn it off. It's not really making you any more secure, but do that. There's a great plugin, there's a few plugins along the lines of like limit login attempts. It does not really make sense for WordPress in the sense that it can be installed pretty much everywhere to have this built in by default, but it does that. Jetpack, which is a fairly well-known plugin from makers of WordPress.com, has, as recently as the version that came out last week, there was another plugin called Brute Protect that is now included in Jetpack that handles a lot of this like cloud-based aspect. So they're not only, let's say, blocking that one person from like logging into your site multiple times, but they're also watching it from a network angle, and they're seeing like the same person trying to break into hundreds of thousands of sites. So they're just blocking that particular IP address, whatever it is. It's a really handy tool. That of like anything, that's the one that I would probably recommend the most. I don't work at Automatic or WordPress.com or anything like that. I'm not a shield for them, but like this in particular thing in terms of protecting it at a network level definitely makes a lot of sense. Again, like there's nothing inherently harmful about any of these plugins, and a lot of them are certainly good and high quality. You just have to be mindful of like, just because there's a checkbox that says turn off this thing, doesn't mean that it's necessarily making you more secure. It might make some other site more secure, but it might either not affect you, or it might take away a feature that you actually did want. It might just be trying to prevent you from, let's say, harming yourself. We'll go back here first. Yeah.
My question is, I have a small business, and in the middle of creating my WordPress site, teenagers decided they wanted to sell Viagra on my site, and so it keeps popping up. I haven't been able to fix it, so at this point, I just want to rebuild it.
Yes.
Because it wasn't finished anyway. And so what I'm wondering is what to build into it. So you talked about the SSL. What other things would be useful to prevent that from happening?
So often when this happens, it is commonly, if it is a WordPress related issue and not, let's say, your host, it is commonly due to the result of a like outdated, insecure, random plugin. When plugins have security vulnerabilities, like hackers jump all over it, which is why we're doing all these auto updates that I was talking about earlier. We've only done a few dozen of these because there aren't that many critical vulnerabilities every day, but there are enough that we need to be reacting pretty commonly to these. Keeping everything absolutely up to date is very key. Actually cleaning up your site can be kind of an intensive process and might require either whether we're talking like an expert, or we're also just talking about perhaps like going to your hosting company and saying like, I need help. A lot of the hosting companies, like a lot of them actually employ people who full-time work on the WordPress project, whether in a support role or in a development role, including like Bluehost, GoDaddy, DreamHost. They all employ people full-time to work on WordPress, which is really awesome. It also is nice because a significant amount of their business, of course, is WordPress driven. So it makes sense for them to do that, but they can also help you. Yes, it would be good to do things like SSL, but also like the big one, aside from WordPress and hosts and everything else, is just like your password is probably not very good. To be perfectly honest, like it is almost always a password. We get a lot of people who don't do this, please, because we don't even like try responding too much anymore. Like they email security@wordpress.org and they say like, my site was hacked. This happens like once a week, which really in the grand scheme of like 50 million sites is really not that bad. But they say like, my site was hacked, and then they'll like send us the logs. They're good enough to send us the logs, but not good enough to realize that their like password was obviously just brute forced in the span of like 3 attempts. Like, do not use password. So like I personally, I use a password manager, like 1Password or LastPass or something like that. Like I think we should definitely have a user security talk at a future meetup, because a lot of these were like very code security. But like that would be the most important thing for that is like know what you're using, and especially for passwords, like use a good one. I actually, my default password is 50 characters. That's what I use coming out of my manager.
Mine's only 12.
Yeah, I use 50. So, and I have no idea what any of them are. Obviously, I know one that gets into that thing, and that's about it.
Yeah, I was also going to say, Nacin was talking about the plugins and outdated plugins. Besides keeping your plugins up to date, when you're going to just randomly search to like, I need to find a plugin to do X, take a good look at each of those options that are coming back and see when each one was last updated. Because you will find the plugin like, oh, there's 3 options here. This one looks great. Last updated 3 years ago.
You can also see when they were, how many sites they run on. They'll say like active installs, which is a fairly new thing. We no longer show downloads very prominently. You can see like active installs like 1 million plus.
That's probably safe.
Last updated 2 days ago.
Yeah,
that's pretty good.
I'd say if a plugin hasn't been updated in 6 months, they can
Potentially.
probably look for another.
It depends. I have some plugins that I haven't updated, and I update it. I go in and update it like once a year just to like bump the fact that it still works. just because I know it works and
You
it's
should
fine.
do 6 months, then I'll start using it.
I'll do it in 6 months. But then other than that, like we actually don't even show plugins and search results that have been updated in the last few years. So, yeah.
Our site got hacked through an outdated plugin, which kind of made me realize that what you're saying about keeping your plugins updated. But what saved us was that we were using WordPress, and that was just a way to go back to the previous day's copy and got us back up and running immediately. So is that the right solution, or is that
It is certainly one solution. I wouldn't say that like backing up your site to the point where it wasn't hacked is like, obviously it's not the best solution. It's great as a safety net. WordPress, Backup Buddy, there's a lot of other plugins that exist. Those happen to both be pay services. There are a number of others that are not. Your host in many cases can back up your site for you, in many cases for free. They're doing it like nightly and whatnot. They're keeping it for a certain number of days. On top of this, like there's a few other things as well. Jetpack, actually, in the experimental way, you're able to turn on automatic updates for all your plugins if you wanted to. So if you just want to like live on the wild side, especially for like a personal site, just like have everything always updated, and it'll just do it. My site is like that. I have it set to just automatically update everything like within 20 minutes or something like that. So
that's a plugin that creates that automatic.
Jetpack can do this. I mean, again, like there's a lot of good plugins that do all of these different things, but that one in particular can do auto updates. I don't know if you have anything to add to that from backups.
Yeah, backups are good. But yeah, backups are not security.
Yeah.
But it's always nice to.
Save your ass.
Yeah. Thanks for doing that.
I was just gonna say, I also had the Viagra on a site this past week, and I used WordPress, and there was another plugin, I think it's called anti-malware. I had to upload it, but they removed and quarantined all the files that cleaned the site.
That is
Plugin
excellent.
did it.
There's another plugin called like Exploit Scanner, which also handles a lot of at least finding the issues. There's a great set of security experts known as Security,
Yeah, I used them.
SUCURI.net.
You have to pay them to remove it.
Yes,
When they-
but they also do like a lot of like free tools as well to kind of detect what's going on.
That's
So
how
that
I
can
found it.
in many cases help you.
This is probably more on the user side, but in the old days, I remember hearing scary stories about malicious code hidden in sketchy themes.
Yes.
But now with the theme checking kind of right there in the dashboard, is that as serious? Is that still something to look out for or not?
So if you are getting a theme from someone who you are paying, make sure that they are like reputable. That's a pretty important thing. In fact, if you go to WordPress.org/themes, you can look at a commercial list of commercial theme companies. Those are all ones that we feel like we know are not scammers and we trust, and we probably even know a lot of the people who work there personally. There's like 75 or 80 different companies listed on this page easily. And those you could, if you wanted to buy a theme from, go for it. If you're getting a free theme, make sure that you are getting a free theme from WordPress.org. I would not get a free theme from anywhere else except for WordPress.org or WordPress.com. That is it. There's no reason to have a free theme hosted somewhere else. If you are trying to buy a theme, buy the theme. Don't go somewhere else and find the free version of the theme or the discounted version of the theme, because chances are it is like malware that looks pretty. Like that is essentially what they end up being. Those are the main pieces for that. There isn't a whole lot else for that. Like that, those are pretty clear-cut guidelines. It's way easier to talk about themes than just talk about plugins. There's a plugin called Theme Check that can check a lot of things, but it's looking for just standards, not just security.
I was gonna say, if you really end up wanting to go with some random theme maker because they've made something and you really want to buy it kind of thing, hire a programmer that you trust, give them a couple $100 stipend to look through it for you.
And especially now, like if this is not just your personal site, but like this is, you are some nonprofit, there are a lot of them in DC, like do not, oh my God, the number of times that I've seen like government agencies try and like grab like a $200 off the shelf theme and be like, it'll be fine. Oh God, you're running like millions of hits on this and I don't understand. So
yeah, because that's actually a good point.
Don't be that cheap. It's just because it's free software doesn't mean there's no money involved with it.
Right, because in some cases, it's not even just the malware aspect, but it's the the theme may not be written well, and we actually ran into that once where it was from one of the reputable sites, and it was this great looking theme that did all sorts of wonderful, wonderful things. Turns out it wouldn't even run on the, not even AWS Micro, but not even AWS Small. It's like this theme was doing so much stuff, every hit needed 12 CPUs because it was not written well. It was just trying to do way too much for like serving a single page. And you know, someone hired us to come in. It's like, oh, my site's not working. Why is it not working? We came and looked and went, it's a bad news for you. How much do you like that theme? You're not going to like it anymore.
With that, was there one more question? I think I just saw a hand like almost jump up right there. Maybe not. Yes.
I just have a quick question. I sort of like had my site hacked, and then I started trying to fix it, and that's when I found out about all the security plugins. So now I have installed Brute Protect and WordFence, but I got locked out of my login page.
This sounds like it's the whole security versus usability thing.
Yeah, that's what I thought. But the weird thing is I can log in from another computer, but not from the original computer that I set up.
So they like blocked your IP address. Now this is very likely just a local block on your machine. It's also possible that if you try back now, it'll be fine. Or you just tried way too many times. In this case, you probably need to figure out which plugin did it, probably Brute Protect. There's probably a way to like get the IP unblocked or something like that. Or you can just wait like a week later, Comcast will move your IP to something else anyway. So then it's someone else's problem. Then your neighbor will not be able to. So we can talk a little bit more about that later because I'm curious. Also, like we know people at Brute Protect, and we can just tell them, hey, like this person is okay. She came to a meetup. Please remove her IP. So with that, I want to thank all of you for coming to WordPressDC. Thank you very much to our speakers, to our sponsor, to the other organizers. What we normally do at the end of these meetups, it only takes like 5 minutes, I swear, and that is not just consuming the remaining food and drink. But we normally do this really cool thing where we ask if anyone is hiring, and then they just say like in 10 words or less. Well, you don't need to. The word count doesn't matter, but not 5 minutes. Basically, like who you like, where you work, and like what are you hiring for? And then after that, we normally then do like, is anyone looking for work? And we will start with Scott, our sponsor.
Chief Rock Creek looking for front-end developers all the time.
Front-end developers, yeah.
My name's Dave. I work for a healthcare IT company. We stood up a new website fall. We worked with an agency for the last year, and now we're not with the agency any longer, so we're looking for a freelance WordPress developer to help us with some projects.
Awesome. So back here, yeah. Yeah.
Chris, I'm the director of operations at ADCQ. We're about 2 blocks up the road. Looking for full-time and contract WordPress developers, particularly one mid to senior and one more junior.
My name is Jeff Morley. I'm a tech idiot. Only my second meetup meeting. I have a website called JFK Facts. So what I do is content and audience. I get 55,000 people a month at my website. I'm looking for somebody who's interested in doing the tech development and the business strategy side of it. I can bring the eyeballs and the people and the content and credibility with mainstream news organizations. I'm looking for somebody to handle the other side. If you're interested in that, we should have a conversation.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Jesse Blumenthal. Marcus and Ben are with Engage, which is a digital agency based in Old Town. They've got 25 of us, and we're looking for WordPress developers.
Awesome. Taylor.
My name is Taylor Lovett. I work for a full-service distributed WordPress agency. We are hiring web developers, designers, front-end guys, business people, accountants, anyone who's looking to be open source community.
And I don't know if this applies to anyone else, but they are like fully remote, scattered across the US, and I believe some people in Europe now as well.
Europe, India,
there you go.
Africa.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Casey, one of the co-organizers. I always have this axe to grind. It's helpful if you post on the message board. It's never used, and I like seeing
Oh,
it
yeah.
used. So
Usually we don't
you can
know.
refer to it too, because I've already lost sight of a lot of you guys. If you post in the message board in the actual meetup, then you can link to your job and stuff there. That's all. Thank you.
Anyone else? Yeah.
My name is Louis McCoy. I'm a partner and CTO of an online house. We're just in the street. We're looking for work, but we're actually looking for some Python developers with a background in statistics or data science, that sort of thing.
I had someone be like, oh, I'm looking for Drupal developers. Yes.
My name's David, and I have a website, WordPress website, and I'd love to meet a freelance WordPress security consultant because I think we need some help.
All right. Anyone else? And then if anyone is in particular looking for work that does not already like have, I mean, there's like one fish and 20 people going after it. So if you need a job in the WordPress world, come to a meetup or like bring your friends and say like, you should do this. So anyone? Yeah.
So my name is Rahul Singh. I am looking for very difficult problems to solve, generally integration problems. And I know that in the WordPress community, sometimes if it doesn't do WordPress, it's like hands up, I don't want to deal with it. So any difficult problems, I'd love to solve them. Thanks.
Anyone else? Yes.
Yeah, sorry, I'm Bruce Fulton. I 15 years experience as a web developer, became freelance this month, so.
Congratulations. All right. That's it, I think. All right. With that, thank you all for coming. Hope to see you next month.